like just got progressively more mutated by the sort of eldritch forces under this, like the heart, effectively,
Hmm.
and they ended up like their body was covered in sphincters. They were just like this. They could
Why?
this
Because
is
Eldritch.
player agency.
So hello, Marshall. It's been a couple of months. How are
It's been
things
a
for you?
while.
It's
It's
been a
been a
little while.
while. Yeah. Good. Just working. Yeah, too many hours. Glad to have money because you need money to survive in this capitalist society.
Yep, and to buy more
However, I
dice.
would also to buy more dice. Uh, I do like sleep though, and like my own time to do stuff.
Hmm.
I play roleplay games.
So, as you know from the Discord chat, we have a little gimmicky thing to kick things off, to lean into the slice puns. So, if you could bring any slice to this interview, what would you bring, and
I
what
could
have
bring
you
any
brought?
slice. It would be this slice right here. This is a slice of
Ooh,
banana loaf.
that is a tasty
Mm.
looking banana loaf.
It is not homemade. I bought it from a shop to pull out for this moment. Uh, oh, good.
That is the of approval right there. And
Mm.
so, what any particular reason why you went for the banana loaf?
It was the one that looked most like a slice.
I need to get a slice. I don't know which. That looks slice like. We'll take that.
Yeah, there was like muffins and like whole things, but that was the only one that's clearly been cut up and was in stock. Stock? Is that the right word for food? I
I
don't
guess
know.
so. I guess there's a
Mm.
stock, yeah, a batch. But yeah, um,
Yeah,
were you one of those, one of the many people who were making banana bread throughout the pandemic and that kind of thing?
I did not get to that point. I no. I was like, oh yeah, I'll definitely get to the baking thing. I will. Yeah, I'll pick up the knitting. I don't know what the other things that people were lockdowning, but I got the knitting gear, and I sort of twiddled a little bit. I went, it's too hard. Uh,
Not for me.
Complicated. Yeah, no baking for me.
Well, I mean, what as it's turned out, why do the baking yourself when you can go to a shop and they will supply it for you?
Exactly. I'm keeping people employed in money. I don't know. Yeah,
Doing your bit.
yeah, exactly.
I think a great place to start is the beginning. How did you first get into RPGs? What was your first experience of it?
My very first experience of it was at school, um, but it was like a one-off thing that happened, and then I didn't get into it for another like I don't know, 15, 20 years. Um, yeah. So that would have been like 15 or 16, and we played one of the Star Wars roleplay games for a single session. Um,
What was
I
that
say
like?
one of because your first session, you don't really know a lot of the rules. So whatever the GM was saying was the game.
Right.
So I don't know which of the three, four, five Star Wars games it
Mm.
was. Mystery. But yeah, we had fun. We rode speeder bikes. We were mean to stormtroopers. We were beaten up by Ewoks. All the
So,
classics.
so presumably you guys were playing rebels of some variety.
Yeah, or that sort of secret third thing of like Han Solo-y types. That aren't rebels but aren't Imperials kind
Just
of
the
deal.
neutrals, the true neutrals.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm sure we were doing good rebelly stuff, but all I can remember was like us needing to try and pole vault over electric fences. So
Marvelous. Okay, so that was the very beginning, and then that was a
then
one-off, and then
long gap of nothing happening, and then when I was at film school, Um, I'd been sort of like looking into D&D, and there was podcasts happening and streams happening, and fifth edition was like, uh, you know, getting all the popular stuff. That was the sort of as fifth edition was like really kicking off, and all the publicity for that was happening in podcasts, etc., etc.
So that must have
So I'd sort of,
been a few years ago now. That must have been what? Did it
yeah,
launch?
I want to say like
2015?
yeah, so it was around 2015, 2016, that kind of time. Um, that I was like, this stuff looks cool. And then someone at the film school was like, I used to GM back in third edition. I can run you guys through some fifth edition stuff. So we played some fifth edition stuff, and the GM did like 2 sessions, but then was had to do like a lot of essays for the BA course at the film school, and I was on the postgraduate diploma part, so I was like, I got loads of free time. So I then GM'd like the next 3 sessions. So I went from like having played twice to GMing,
Wow.
which was interesting. Um, yeah, and then there was a sort of bit gap again, and then started playing and running for some friends.
So to go back to that a moment. That first time GMing, is always a bit daunting, right? How
Hmm.
did you find that going to? Did you like put a lot of time into like reading up on the rules and like getting everything in place beforehand, or were you a bit more gung ho about it? Like, yeah, just talk us through that. Like, how did you feel?
So I'd like as a person who likes to sort of read the manual. Um, I had like read the full rule book before even playing at all.
Ah,
Um, yes, I was like, well, this is D&D, so you must. This is the book for D&D. I must read the book for D&D so I can play D&D. So I had as good a grasp as you can have on the rules from one read through, having not played it. Um,
so this is the player's handbook or the dungeon master's
Player's
guide?
handbook.
Okay.
Player's handbook. Um, and then when it came to running sessions, I was like, okay, well, I have to prepare everything. I must do the deep prepare. Uh, Wait, which order did I do it in? So I did one session that was deep prepare, one session that was complete flying by the seat of my pants, no prep whatsoever. Um, they both have their merits. Uh, yeah, there's if you're flying by the seat of your pants, you don't have to check your notes, which is great. You can just say a thing, and it's the rules now. That's
Freeing.
what happened. The people, yeah, exactly. You don't need to check anything. You don't need to figure out if wait, I've got the adventure printed here. Um, if I kill this character now, do I need to like change a complete different part of the adventure later?
Mm-hmm.
No, I just kill them, and whatever happens, happens.
And you roll
Uh,
with it.
yeah, exactly. It's less good when it comes to like combat and monsters because D&D has stats for monsters.
Yes. Yes, I can imagine you can fall into a few more traps that way, so to
Hmm.
speak. If you like,
Yeah,
I need to keep track of. There are some things that are set in place, like the monster's armor class and the monster's hit points. Like these are things that you will need to track. You can't just make it
yeah,
up, or because
yeah.
if
I
you
mean,
forget what
you
the armor class
can
is,
you can, but uh, part of it is you want to have a level of trust between you and the players and the rules.
Mhm.
And if you're changing the rules all the time, how can the players trust the that it's um fair? I
Mm.
not but like the yeah, you as the GM have effectively unlimited power. Um, so you have to be uh judicious. What's the right word? Anyway,
But being
uh,
fair is essentially what you're
being
getting
fair,
at.
fair, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I guess with that as also that comes if because it's almost like not just it being fair, but the world sort of having
Mm.
a law, having a canon that it makes that things
Think.
make logical sense within that world. And if you start throwing stuff at the
Hmm.
throwing the kitchen sink at it, that can lose you almost lose the immersion of the game for the players as well.
Is verisimilitude the right word for this?
I think that sounds plausible.
Sounds cool.
Verisimilitude.
If you're trying to immerse yourself in a world and the rules keep changing, it takes you out of the world. If the roll to climb for one person was a 15 and for another person it's 5, you're like, well, why? Well, why? What? What's going on?
Yeah.
If like I rolled a 20 and I hit that guy and that guy rolled a 20 and missed.
Yeah. What? Where's the logic there? Yeah, the appearance of being true or real is the definition of verisimilitude. So there we go. I think it's very appropriate, very apt.
Yeah,
and that's our word for the day. Use it in sentences wherever you can. So, which would you say that you lean towards more, or is a preferable sort of approach to GMing? Would it be more in the rigorous note taking and prep work? The fully improvised, or somewhere in between the two?
I think it depends on the system. I think there are systems that reward prep, and I think there are systems that reward free-form inspiration, creation. Like there's definitely systems where, like, in the rulebook it's like, do not have a plan for your session. Come in at the start of your session, you were like, the players are going to pick a set number of like goals they want to meet, and then come up with an adventure based on that, and that's real cool. So yeah, I like and play both, but it does depend on the system. Like, there's definitely games where I've been like, this should not be run, like seat of your pants gaming. And other things where like, I wish they didn't have a plan, because this system does not reward a pre-built adventure.
So could you give us a couple of examples of each of systems?
Yeah,
that
I mean, specifically a roleplay game that says don't come in with a plan, or if you do, a very loose plan. Heart, the City Beneath. Yes, that is great. That is product placement. That is it's by Rowan, Rook, and Deckard. That also have Spire set in the same world and with mostly the same rules, similar rules. But that is a lot about like player-driven adventuring. Like Heart will have like this big page of goals, of minor goals, major goals, and I think Zenith is the top bracket. And if you complete a minor goal, you get a minor feat. I don't know the proper terms for it. If you complete a major goal, you get a major feat. If you complete a Zenith goal, you get a Zenith feat. They're not called feats. But yeah, so it's the players' choices drive the story. Like, they can pick, I think, 2 beats per session, and if you've cleared off a beat, you can't pick that one again. So you can't just always be like, I get thrown out of a pub is like a sample beat, or like I bring about the downfall of a town is like a major beat kind of stuff. So yeah, so that sort of drives the story, and then you sort of come up with how you can get through as many beats for the players as possible in a session. And yeah, it's also a game where none of the roles are forced onto the players. Like, they're like, I want to do that thing, and you're like, cool, okay, so if you do that thing, that's probably going to be this kind of difficult, and it'll go, I think, this stat, unless you've got a pitch for another stat. And I go, no, and again, like, and then this is how much you're risking, and they'll go, you know what, actually, I don't want to do that one. Let's come up with some other way of doing a thing. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a bit more transparency ahead of any potential rolling, being like, okay, this could be quite difficult, and then like sort of giving an option of backing out essentially before doing anything.
Yeah, you're never going to have the moment of, um, I don't know, I pick the lock and oh no, there's a monster behind the door, and well, I guess something like that. But I'm trying to think of the best example. Where's the book? I don't know.
Basically
Yeah,
being like, oh
it's a
yeah,
lot
you can
more
try and
like
pick this lock. Oh, by the way, and then after they've attempted it, no, the DC was 30. Like there's not,
yeah.
yeah.
You've got like a couple of different, I say, stats, and I'd be like, or they'd already know what stat was going to take damage if they attempted the thing. It wouldn't be like a twist
Aha, okay.
surprise afterwards. Some of the beats that I was describing, like do a thing this session, some of them are like take massive amounts of certain type of damage.
Oh, okay.
So like their goal is to suffer and eventually die. Like almost all of the Zenith beats, all the Zenith beats will take you out of the game. Like you are no longer a character, usually because you're dead. But the goal in the game is to expire your character. Um, in some epic way. When I last ran it, one person became a train. Another person, I think, became like, yeah, it is various deaths. Like I think
A lot of death.
one of the ones is you end up like trapped in bureaucracy for the rest of your life. Like,
Oh no,
you're taken out of the game because you're doing paperwork.
that's awful.
Yeah,
I
I think that's...
I take back any compliments I had about this game. No, I don't like it anymore. I don't want that.
That's a choice. That's the thing. The players choose which ending they want to go for, and when they want to do it. Really.
And so, one example of a system then that you would say rewards much more the prep work of the GMing side. What would you say?
I feel like anything with sort of complicated stat blocks for enemies. I think D&D is one that rewards some planning. I think Pathfinder is one that rewards planning. My current favorite, Pathfinder. What's the name of it? Aegon. Aegon is almost certainly you need like a plan for that because you've got to get through like an island's worth of adventuring in one session.
Oh wow!
So you need to keep the pace up and like make sure people tick off enough goals by the end of the however many hours you've got planned.
Yeah, that does feel a bit more dungeon crawly, like when you have that. Yeah, and you've got to get through a lot of encounters and such.
But also it's like the Aegon prep is like very small prep, but like concentrated.
Right.
I'd say. Whereas like something like the D&D or Pathfinder, it's like I need to read through Monster Stat Block and know what spells they can use and how best to use those spells and what like sort of how they would use their cool abilities that they have.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas something like Masks, the Next Generation, full title, is again something that is a little more player driven or should be ? Where enemies are just whatever you make up and they can do whatever you think is cool for a superhero to have. Supervillain, I should say.
They probably think they're the heroes, though, from the villain's perspective. Of course. So only chaotic evil know they're the bad guy.
Yeah, because something like that, like any sort of Powered by the Apocalypse, the target numbers are always the same.
Okay.
So yeah, you don't really need stats. Depending on the some of them have a bit more staty, like their weapon does 2 harm or 1 harm or whatever. But it's 1 harm, 2 harm, or 3 harm. It's not. You don't need a lot of prep for that.
Across all of the different systems that you've played, all the different TTRPGs, for lack of a better acronym, that you've played, can you share with us sort of a couple of your most memorable moments, whether that's as a player or as a GM? There's a lot to delve into, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think it was D&D where a couple of characters ended up, like a couple of player characters ended up in a player character relationship that was very like high drama, lots of like arguments and storming off and
Very
getting
soap
back
opera.
together and family members like meeting the parents and that kind of stuff.
Was that from the Sunday D&D when we
Mhm.
met? That was between I can't remember the players' names, the
Oh,
characters' names. There was the
yeah.
warlock and
Characters'
the
names were
rogue.
Wilma. Yes,
Oh, Wilma is
and
in sorry, Pavel's character. Yes, that was
yeah,
it. And
and uh,
she played a rogue.
yeah, it's like it's a knockoff name from an actual like a famous D&D character. Um, what was anyway?
Anyway, but those
It's
two,
been several years since those characters
of course, it has.
were
Yeah.
played. What else was fun? What in that same campaign, one of my character died. So I took over for a session as the GM to run my character's funeral.
Wow.
I have run a session where I added to the deck of many things. I brought real cards, so people could pull real cards from a real deck.
Hmm.
And yeah, that I feel like some players ended up with slight trauma because they basically kept uh pulling they did basically wanted to pull all the cards all the time. Um and well, I think yeah, they pull some cards and then something go horribly wrong, so they'd pull more cards until they got to like one of the wish equivalent cards
Right.
so that they could rewind time to before they'd pulled the other cards
I
so they
think
could have another go.
did I
And
read
they
a write up of
rewound
this?
probably.
Sorry, go
And they
ahead. Just
rewound time like 5 or 6 times. They started they had like a ogre NPC companion that they emotionally manipulated into pulling cards, which I think is the bit that caused trauma, like the emotional manipulation of this not particularly bright character. I think is what kind of broke one of the players. was that was messed up.
hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think one player was a little mad that in one of the time loops they got like extra levels and a bunch of money, and then because someone else got stuck in a like prison dimension, they rewound time and lost all those levels and that money.
Oh, gutting. So gutting.
Anyway, yeah, if you want a memorable session that will mess with your players, yeah, deck of many things or equivalent chaos items. Very fun.
Yeah, quite possibly messing with the entire campaign as well. Like, could go in a completely different direction
Yeah,
depending on what's been pulled. Um,
yeah.
but yes, sorry, you were recounting some memorable moments. But
Memorable
yeah.
moments. What's some from other systems? Let's think. Um, a Pathfinder situation. So Pathfinder, like high level play, gets very extra, like
Hmm.
very anime superpowers of. So we were on an airship, fighting some monsters. I think they were like Oni or Kami kind of equivalent things. And one of the players, in an attempt to kill the enemy they were fighting, tackled the enemy and then jumped off the airship in an attempt to like crush the enemy into the ground several, I don't know, 1,000 feet below.
Ow.
So at that point, like several of us then jumped off the airship. Thankfully, all but one of us had some form of flight, so we were able to like pull this back out of the bag. But it was like, I guess everyone's jumping off the airship now. Let's jump off the airship. But yeah, also a couple people did have. Uh, there's a feat called catfall,
Uh-huh.
which the higher your proficiency in athletics, acrobatics, one of those two. If you get to like legendary proficiency, you will take damage from. You will not take any damage from any height of fall. So you can jump out of airships and survive the landing with no damage, as long as your legendary proficiency, which is like level 17
Mm.
upwards. you can be there. Yeah,
Nice. Just
it's
3 point
fun.
land.
Yeah,
After 1,000
exactly.
feet.
Superhero. Mm.
Very nice.
Yeah, we did some wild stuff in that campaign because that was like level 20 Pathfinder. So we were effectively, we were doing like fighting gods kind of stuff at the end of that campaign.
It
Uh,
always ramps up to eventually fighting the gods at some point in a campaign.
yeah, exactly. Heart. I told you about the person who ended up becoming a train.
Yes.
Yeah, there was another character who like just got progressively more mutated by the sort of eldritch forces under this, like the heart, effectively, and they ended up like their body was covered in sphincters. They were just like this. They could.
Why? Because Eldritch.
Player agency. But yeah, so there'd just be lots of like openings, orifices all over them, and they'd talk out of their elbow.
Wait, so sorry, this was the player's choice that they were covered in
I mean,
sphincters.
like there was sort of like the feat that they chose for their, or on like the damage they picked up for their character, and then that's how they sort of described it.
Oh,
Like it's a sort of
okay.
they added to what was already in the book, um, in rules appropriate ways, and yeah, and they also had like this really like they would for that character they did this like really awful like high pitched witch voice, like oh hell yeah, I'm coming for her. I can't even do it. It was awful. It hurt me every time they spoke. But that you suffer for your players so that your players can have a good time.
Noted for the hags, which are upcoming, of course,
Hmm.
in the Manylands. Uh,
Yeah, I'm a
Voices of
player. I'm not
fun.
allowed to suffer. Uh,
Yes, no, we don't let the players suffer. The players are like your children, and you're like
mhm.
you're the adult in the
They can
room.
never experience any trauma or pain. It's very
It's not
important that
allowed.
nothing bad ever happens in a roleplay game. But no, I'm a fan of player death. So
I do.
no, character death, not player death.
I was going to say player death. Yes, player character death. Yes.
Yeah,
Uh, uh,
it is in the rules. Like there are systems where death is like deliberately not in the rules. Like Tales from the Loop, your characters can die unless you decide with the GM that is the narrative choice, but really shouldn't be. Uh, yeah, like whereas D&D, there are detailed rules for dying. Um, yeah,
there's
Masks
some.
again, a game where your characters can't die. There are systems where like the death should always be narrative, like a superhero thing, where it's like dun dun dun. The big moment, someone's carrying the person's body out of the burning building, etc.
Mm.
But stuff like D&D Pathfinder, the sort of I think simulationist, where like there's lots of rules for lots of things because it's meant to be realistic, somewhat like high adventure, but like in even Lord of the Rings, like this, people die.
Mm.
People die in not noble ways. They just die because you're running around with swords and arrows and going into dangerous places voluntarily. Your home game where a couple of us died from but I think most of the my character died, but my character died from like trying to get other people out to safety, like going back in, healing people, shielding people, and then them dying. Like that's a heroic moment. That's like came uh organically through the system.
Mm.
Like we didn't plan that ahead of time.
Yeah,
Uh
it was a trap. It was a complex trap which was pretty deadly. And to be fair, you were very it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Very true to character that you were playing a grave cleric, and so one of his friends had already had met their demise inside the trap, and your character had got out safely, but then realised that this other one was stuck in there and needed to be recovered, and went back in to save him, and then or to recover his body at the very least. and then your character died doing that. That was, and like you say, it felt like it came organically, but it also felt very fitting. Like at no point did it feel like it being cheated or manipulated. Like it was. It was a suitable death for that character, I would say.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that system, it leans a lot into the randomness of the dice rolls, whereas like a different system where it's more like negotiated, like you'd probably like plan like or discuss how to make a death cool or not cool. But the D20 is a very random dice.
It is indeed.
Yeah. Whereas something like 2d6, 3d6, you've got like that curve, and it's less it's still random, but it's less unpredictable.
Favorite character concept that you have yet to try at a table?
I don't know about favorite character concept, but there's one character that I sort of created in preparation for like a new campaign, I think it was, or might have been thinking a character was going to die, but then they didn't, or something like that. But sort of, came up with a character, drew a picture. Was like, oh, they're cool, trying, even coming up with like a potential accent, which is more than I usually do these days, because I always feel a bit weird about doing accents.
It's a safe space, Marshall. No problem. If you want to do an accent here, no problem.
No. Like voices, fine. Accents, then you sort of like unless you can somehow create an accent that doesn't exist in any real world culture, you start like getting edgy into what might,
I would get you getting into stereotypes and that kind of thing. Or profile.
Because either you do like one of the safe accents, like I don't know, like various UK accents or American or European, but then you sort of but like then you're reinforcing that those are the default safe accents, and you're reinforcing the dominance of those cultures. Or you do an accent from like a marginalized cultural community in media, and then you're like, but now it's a bit iffy. So voices, like high pitched or low pitched. There's farts and talking or whatever. So anyway, this character, when I was coming up with them, had a Scottish accent. They were a tiefling, they were a swashbuckler. And I can't remember, they just sort of kept floating around and sitting around, and now like someone has done, I guess, fan art of them. Like someone I know who's an artist was like, oh, can I draw your character? I was like, sure, the character I've never played, yes. So there's now like someone else's art that they did because they liked the character of this character.
So what was it that compelled you to create the tiefling swashbuckler character? What was the idea?
I don't know.
Scottish accent as well. That's interesting.
Yeah. They were sort of like I don't know what really inspired them, other than like I thought swashbuckler was cool. What would be called the swashbuckler? Maybe tiefling. Blah blah blah. If we give them like a Scottish accent, they can be like a less offensive Sean Connery Bond. Because they've still, that's the swashbucklery attitude. But
like, want to engage me in single combat, do you?
but James Bond is a terrible, terrible character.
Yes,
awful. I mean, he's not a human being, but if he was a human being, he'd be one of the worst human beings. Yeah. Anyway, so it was like a little bit of James Bonding in there. So that sort of swashbuckly Scottish accent, but a far nicer person.
So the roguish audacity, the confidence of the rogue, but just with better values.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's do a question from our random question chart. The questions of which have been donated by our viewers on Discord, on the Discord chat for A Slice of Dice. I'm going to go with the top 12. If you can roll a D12. That's D12. A lovely D12.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll focus. If I hide my
That's
face,
focusing
maybe.
Enough, yeah.
Yeah. I won this set, actually.
And is that got like flakes in it?
Little flakes of copper. The numbers are copper, and it's like a oceany, like clear, but with like a swirl of cloudy
Yeah,
ness in it as well.
lovely, very pretty. All right, roll the d12, sir, and let's see
All
what the random
right.
question is.
Rolling that d12. I have a 5. 5 on the die.
I am so happy that you didn't roll a 7. The last two have both rolled 7s, which is
Okay.
bizarre. But 5. Ever had a squalid meal?
Oh
Which is
God.
worth 3 copper pieces in
3 copper
5th edition.
pieces. What is the description of a squalid meal though? Have I had a squalid meal? Like, does a pot noodle count as squalid?
I would say yes. You know, I think that yes, there is a bit of a. You could say that like somebody affluent might be like, oh yeah, I really fancy having a pot noodle, and that be sort of their bit of rough, if that makes sense.
No, I feel like it must be worse than a pot noodle. Like,
I think it could well be worse than a pot noodle.
yeah,
But I think that would apply. But I think you could go worse for sure.
yeah. I don't think I have. I don't think I have. I mean, like, I've done macaroni cheese where you just like grate cheddar, like you just cook macaroni and grate cheddar on, and I feel like that's not amazing.
Was that I can't be bothered to make anything else, or was that an end of the month? I just need to sort of get to payday kind of meal.
Can't be bothered to make anything else meal.
Fair enough.
It's cheesy pasta, win-win.
Love a cheesy pasta. Love a cheesy
Yeah,
pasta.
if you're talking to Italians, I've had pineapple on pizza, which is probably maybe wretched, even not squalid.
They just throw you out immediately.
Yeah, yeah, I'm outing myself as a pineapple on pizza eater. Sorry, I was looking up, seeing if anyone on the internet had a list for squalid meal. Squalid meal: humble pie filled with tripe or cow heel. No. Acorn soup. No. Rice and peas. I've had rice and peas. Green chili stew, grilled snake and macadamia, frogs on skewers, onion soup. I've had onion soup.
Oh, no,
Lizard
macadamias
crawl
came
with
under
nutcracker.
squalid
I know.
meals.
It's an interesting. I think it's just because it's just not mixed up. I don't know. It seems a limited amount of preparation. Crisped worm skewers and potatoes. Whereas paw has got porridge. I feel like porridge is close to squalid, but maybe.
Maybe gruel comes under squalid and porridge is the step up.
Mushroom stew with cornbread, leg of mutton and goose eggs. Okay, I sort of see the difference. Yeah, I've definitely had squalid food then, according to this list. Onion soup.
Yeah, French onion soup. Wow. It does sound like cheesy pasta would come under a squalid meal because it's just 2 components. That's
Yeah,
all you
exactly.
need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there we go. The definitive answer is yes. Marshall has, in
Yes.
fact, had a squalid meal.
Yes.
It sounds like we probably all have had a squalid meal at some point.
You know what? That's a damning indictment of the UK as it stands.
As
or
if we
even,
needed any more damning stuff of the UK as it stands.
Exactly. Or even like middle class folks such as ourselves are having squalid meals.
Well, we've got to make ends meet with our squalid meals. If we just never signpost them as squalid meals, who would refer to their food as a squalid meal? Oh dear, I love it. But anyway, Marshall, thank you so much for conducting this interview with me. It's been really interesting to. I knew we were going to that you would touch on other systems, and I always find that beneficial myself because it's like vicariously I'm learning about systems through yourself, but also just to hear. How far back the journey goes, like when you started 15 or so years ago, and then like up to now. It's been a real progression, and I feel like I know you a bit better for that, and that's always lovely. So thank you very much.
I would say always recommend people try out other systems, broaden your horizons. I did like a year of like trying to join any session that had a different system in. As like a way of like going, I must try everything. It was a long year, but it was good.
I mean, how else are you going to know which systems you like unless you try different ones out, right?
Exactly. And I got through like 100 and something. I can't remember the numbers, but it was a big number.
That's like one every 3 days. That's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, the trick is sort of do conventions where you can do like 3 systems in a day.
Ah, smart. Yes. If we don't get to do this sort of format beforehand, I will see you through the interwebs next year when we pick up the session again.
Hey.
Thank
All
you
right.
so much. Take care.
Thanks very much.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of A Slice and Dice. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We really do appreciate your support. And of course, if you'd like to get involved in any future interviews, whether that's being a guest yourself or suggesting some options for our random question chart, join us on our Discord server. There should be a link to that down below.